And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 24 of History's Greatest Idiots, the show in which we delve through the depths of history to bring you the stupidest, deranged, most idiotic moments ever forethought or created by human intelligence. And hopefully you will learn lessons from this and never repeat the mistakes of the past. But who are we kidding? We like repeating the mistakes of the past because sometimes, retro is fun. So,
Yeah.
just look at Stranger Things. That whole show is just retro porn, basically.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It
Yeah.
makes me want to go ride around on my my BMX and go down to the arcade. And
I am not knocking it. I love retro shit. Like, I am as much of a sucker for that kind of opium of the masses as anybody else. But yeah, I am fully aware that show would probably be 25% less interesting if it weren't focused on 80s middle America. So
yeah. Oh, speaking of 80s middle America, I just watched that 8-Bit Christmas on, I think it's on Netflix. That's a good throwback. And the whole time I was like, dude, I had that jacket. Oh my God, I had the same boots.
It's funny because like the 80s, I mean, obviously that's when I was a child, and I'm sure you were a child as well. That was, I think, the point at which like mainstream American popular culture really started to kind of infiltrate British culture. I mean, particularly like the 60s and 70s and obviously the 50s, like music, movies, stuff like that have been coming across. But by the 80s, things like merchandise and clothing like that all made its way over to the UK. And, a lot of kids my generation grew up wearing Spider-Man pajamas and shit like that, and like He-Man shirts, and like everybody had the toys, and that wasn't necessary. I mean, there were people who had that in the 70s, but in the 80s it became a mass-produced thing culturally. So I think
in
that's
the 70s
why
we were still stealing your guys' culture with the British invasion and whatnot.
Yeah, of course. I think that's possibly why. I mean, it has shifted. The nostalgia train has now moved on from the 80s station and moved into the junction that is the 1990s. But I certainly think that because that's when mass production of popular culture exploded, that's why people are still, oh God, give me all of that. Give me Ready Player One. Give me every single ounce of nostalgia you can possibly give me. Derek, how has your week been? How are things over in Arizona?
It's been pretty good. My son got his license for the first time. And
Yes, that happened.
within 3 hours of getting it, he was off to the races and hanging out with his friends. And that was the most stressful moment of my entire life.
Yeah, I think everybody remembers when they get their first car, don't they? Like that's such a landmark moment in your life. You are so much freer than you were the day before, the year before. Then you can do things, you can go places, and especially in America where you need a car really for the majority of life. Whereas in the UK, it's like, I used to walk to school at times. It was only 2.5 miles up and down mountains like that. That's fine. You can do it even in the pissing rain. But like in America, you need a car because that, it could be 10 fucking miles to your school or whatever.
Well, it's a half a mile to his school, and I still have to drive him, and he won't walk. So there. Well, now I don't. But, I guess once we figure out the whole parking permit situation, because we charge for everything here.
Yeah, we some of our major cities do that. There's a place that I used to live down south called St Albans, which is just north of London, which has like parking permits per household because it's a medieval. Well, it's even older. It was the old Roman capital of the UK, right?
Okay.
So it's 2,000 years old. The cathedral, which itself is 1,000 years old, is built using the bricks and stone that were used in the Roman fort. So
that's nuts.
That's
so
crazy.
Cool.
So like obviously, and like the town was expanded, and in the Middle Ages it became very, very successful, but it expanded to the point where it hit the limits. Like you can't build anymore by about 1700. Like St Albans is full. So obviously elements have been redeveloped. A lot of things have been protected, but the city reached a point where like the houses cost a lot more. The roads are still super narrow. The infrastructure is starting to crumble. So they had to, raise money because a lot of people are affluent. So there would be, you could have one car per household, and then the next car you'd have to pay £20 a year parking, and then it'd be like £100 for a third car, and then like 150 for a fourth.
Damn.
So yeah, it's like it's the policy that the Chinese took to children is what some cities in the UK take to parking permits. Like, you can have it, but we won't be happy, and we're going to charge you for it. So
I guess that makes sense. We're just so consumption over here that it's like I have 3 cars. There's 4 of us in the house. If it were up to him, we'd have an extra car, so there'd be 4 of them. And really, I guess we don't need it because I don't ever go anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I've been dating my wife now for 11 years, and 2021 was the first time in our relationship together where we'd had more than one car. So now we have a car each. We'd made do because we'd lived in cities or we'd lived apart and stuff. And there'd be times when and actually the majority of the time that one car was usually a hunk of shit. Like, it was a terrible, battered thing that would just about make it to the long distance locations that we needed it for. But now we both have moderately okay cars. They're not, we're not going to go ragging them around the countryside at 100 miles an hour, but still we have 2 cars and we have space on our drive, and we feel like we made it. Because in the UK, that's actually, for my generation, for the older millennials, it's still kind of unusual for both of you to have a car and a house with a mortgage.
Well, now, hold on.
Very rare things.
You're claiming the millennial tag because I'm the same age as you, and I'm in that lost generation of awesome people that got the technology of being a kid in the 90s and the awesomeness of being a kid in the 80s.
Absolutely,
so we win.
I think I saw a term for it. It's called a zillennial, so a bit Gen Z, bit millennial. So we both know what VHSs are, and probably both of us at some point have played with a Betamax player.
Yep. And a laser disc.
And a laser disc. And I have worked a lot with mini discs. Some people of our generation will remember mini discs. But at the same time, so we know about analog. We're very familiar with analog, but at the same time, there will be people out there like our age who will also still be helping their parents to understand technology and being able to keep up with people for the most part who are 20 years younger than them, hence why we're using StreamYard. So thank you for that. Anyway, so yeah, while we're talking about generations, Derek, who is your idiot for this week?
Well, I've got a pretty good one, I think. I mean, I don't know if he was an idiot in general, but he did some real dumb shit. So there's a lot of people that are really great at a lot of things, and some of them are so good at 1 or 2 things that they think they can do everything. And I think this guy is one of those.
Okay.
His name is Robert O'Hara Burke. He started out as an Irish soldier and a police officer, and later on went on to do something else that put him on my radar, but I'll talk about that in a minute. We'll start at the beginning. Sure. He was born in County Galway, Ireland on May 6th, 1821. The third son of James Hardyman Burke, who was an officer in the British Army, 7th Royal. This is a British Army unit that I can't pronounce, so that's how bad things are here. Fusiliers.
Oh, Fusiliers. Yes.
Yeah, those people.
Yeah, they're like the Royal Fusiliers are like. I mean, they're not like the Green Berets or anything like that, but like the Fusilier Corps are very famous. Like they've been a part of some major battles, major incidents and stuff throughout British military history. So the Fusiliers, it's quite a prestigious thing to be part of the Fusiliers. So that's really good.
Well, and my apologies to the Fusiliers because I'm a dumb American that doesn't know that. So
we get it. Like the majority of people outside of the UK wouldn't really know about them either. So. Yeah.
So he is one of 7 children of this British officer, and Burke, his father, and all of his brothers were all soldiers. And one interesting thing I came across is that his brother James Thomas was a lieutenant in the Royal Engineers, And on July 7th, 1854, at the Battle of Guergo, he became the first British officer killed in the Crimean War.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
So
that's quite a landmark. Wow.
That's just his brother. Just an interesting thing I came across along the way, but we'll get into his military career. He entered the Royal Military Academy at Woolwich in May of 1835. Did I say it wrong?
No, Woolwich is it's a whole thing, but Woolwich, yeah.
Woolwich? Okay.
Woolwich. There you go.
In May of 1835, that's where he went. By December of 1836, he had failed his probationary exam and went to Belgium to further his education instead.
It was probably a good choice, actually. Yeah. Belgium, yeah.
In 1841, at the age of 21, he entered the Austrian army, and in August of 1842, he was promoted to the second lieutenant in the Prince Regent's 7th Rus Regiment of the Hungarian Hussars. Jesus.
Okay.
That's a lot of words.
That was very good. I'm very impressed. Well done.
He spent most of his time with the Imperial Austrian Army posted in northern Italy, and in April of 1847, he was promoted to first lieutenant.
Oh, good. Okay.
Towards the end of 1847, he started having some health problems and went to Ricario Spa, I think I said that right, in northern Italy.
Oh, nice. And convalescing in Italy. That sounds really nice.
Right. Well, and then in June of 1848, he resigned from the Austrian army after charges against him relating to debts and absent without leave came around, but those were dropped. So he left the Austrian army and returned to Ireland in 1848, where he joined the Royal Irish Constabulary. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
Hell yeah.
That's good. Okay,
I've been saying that wrong all day.
You did really good. You did really good.
He did his cadet training at the Phoenix Park Depot in Dublin and was promoted to third-class sub-inspector and stationed in County Kildare and later in Dublin. Okay. So he's wandered through military service, landed on being an Irish cop, which I guess is, I mean, that's
quite a common transition, I think, for a lot of people, isn't it? When they leave the military, a lot of people go into the police force. Yeah, certainly in this country, I'm sure it's the same in the States. A lot of people do that transition, but yeah, that's probably like a good career move.
It's been that way for hundreds of years now, it would appear. So
apparently so.
And around that time, in the 1850s or so, the UK was doing some really neat stuff, and as part of that, Burke immigrated to Australia on a prison ship, nice. And arrived in he actually was going down there to work, not being sent there. That makes sense. He arrived. What's that?
Please get rid of him. Put him on the ship. Just send him to Australia. That's what we do now.
Well, that's what they were doing at the time. They were loading up the convicts and saying, "Hey, at Australia down there, we'll just send them there. It's an island. They can't get off without swimming." Yeah,
and 80% of it is desert. And generations later, the descendants are like, "Thanks, because it's fucking lovely here."
And, well, everything there is also trying to kill you.
It's true, yeah. but the beaches, the standard of living, the women, all just Australia's awesome. It's an awesome place. I'd love to go.
And the trade-off on that is sharks and deadly jellyfish,
spiders, snakes, giant toads destroying the countryside.
The neat half duck, half beaver, venomous mammal marsupial thing
should not exist. It should not. That is a mistake of evolution, right there.
Anyway, enough about Australia. Let's get back to Australia. He was on the Victorian police force and initially posted in Karlsruhe as an inspector, but he was soon promoted to a senior inspector and moved to Beechworth. When his brother was killed at the start of the Crimean War, he did head back to England to enlist, but before he got a chance to get to any fighting, peace broke out, so he headed back down to Victoria in December of 1856.
Right, okay.
So he just missed getting vengeance for his brother and heads back down to Australia. And
I will have blood. Oh, it's finished. Okay.
Oh, well, he was worked up and got himself involved in the Buckland Valley riots, where he beat down some Chinese gold miners when the gold rush broke out in 1857. And in 1858, he was transferred to Castlemaine as the police superintendent.
Ooh, okay.
And here's where stuff gets weird, because he's had this good job as a police officer and in the military, and he's doing all that. And because of that gold rush, the colonists in Victoria are flush with money, and they think, it'd be really cool. What if we found a land route from the southern area here in Victoria up to the northern coast for no real reason at all, other than we can and we have money, so let's do that. And who should do it? Let's do John McDougall Stewart, and he only got halfway there. So let's get somebody that's even better prepared than that explorer. How about we get Robert O'Hara Burke, a policeman, to join up with a dude named William John Willis, a surveyor and astronomical observer, and we send them off to make a path to the northern coast. And that's what they did. This policeman decides he's going to become an explorer.
Okay, as you do. I mean, to a certain extent, I can kind of, like, a lot of people were explorers around this time. I can kind of, like, anyone could take it up. And he had seen the world, he'd been to Italy, been all over the place. But at the same time, you are not prepared for this. A lot of people jumped into exploration because it was the hot craze at the time. But, like, if you are not trained or properly prepared and stuff, you should not be doing that shit, because the previous guy who was an explorer died halfway there. And Australia is a terrible place to get lost in the middle of, because, like I said, 80% of Australia is basically desert, almost uninhabitable, to the point where today there's a community in the Australian outback that have built into the ground to live, because underneath the ground it's a balmy 22 degrees, but above the surface 50 degrees the majority of the day during the summer. So why you would transect one of the largest deserts in the world when you aren't an explorer, surrounded by everything that wants to kill you, I have no fucking idea why you would do that.
Well, it's because they offered a reward of £2,000.
Oh, there we go.
He decided, with no scientific exploring experience whatsoever, and with a reputation for getting lost in his own town, I think the best thing for me to do is to go exploring. So let's find out how that turns out for him here. When the expedition set off from Melbourne in August of 1860, he made sure to load his wagons with everything that he figured that they were going to need. And you figure a few months in the desert, what are you going to need?
Shitloads of water.
Well, he went with Chinese gong, a heavy wooden table and chair set.
What?
1,500 pounds of sugar, and a stationery cabinet, because, where else are you going to put your stationery? In a backpack or some shit?
A stationery cabinet and tables and chairs.
Oh, yeah. He was loaded the hell down. The group was equipped more like a traveling circus than an exploring party, and they managed to get an astounding 4 miles on their first day into the journey. So
I think I could do that. Like, just put my shoes on. I'm pretty certain I could beat that in the desert. They
basically got just far enough that they could still see their houses when the streetlights came on. They could get back home, I guess. Which is smart, because you get a little further in there and it gets dangerous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like we were saying. It actually took them 2 months before they got to the uncharted territory. It took them all the way till September 23rd of 1860, which at that point, several people that were on the excursion decided to resign, including the second in command, George James Landells, and the medical officer, Dr. Herman Beckler, which is just about the point in time when you go, well, shit, we don't have the second in charge or a doctor. I think we should stop. I think we should all just quit here.
Let's call it. Let's call it. We've had a bit of fun. Let's take our fucking stationery cabinet and go home.
But he decided that no, that's not what we're gonna do. As a matter of fact, you guys are going too slow. I know it's hot, temperatures over 100 degrees, but I'm gonna go on ahead of you guys with some people. You guys hang out here, and we're gonna get to the coast and finish blazing this. How about just me and 3 guys do the rest of the way? He takes William Wills, John King, and Charlie Gray to continue on to the coast. And they almost made it, but as they were getting close, they ran into a dense mangrove forest.
Ooh.
And due to the flooding and rains, swamps were rising up. They never actually made it to the open ocean at all. So the mission was technically a failure, and they decided, fuck it, we're going back. On the way back to the base camp at Cooper Creek, Burke accidentally set fire to the tent and destroyed nearly all of their possessions and their safety from the elements and their food. And so now they're weakened by starvation and exposure and wandering through the desert slowly. And the tropical monsoons start to hit. There's a downpour, more flooding, more wet seasons. Before they get there, Gray, Charlie Gray, 4 days before they get back, he died. And they say they rested with him for a day, and then they buried him. And they eventually got to the rendezvous point at Cooper Creek, where they were supposed to meet up with the people they had left behind on April 21st, 1861. But when they got there, they were 9 hours late because the rest of the party had given up waiting and left.
Brilliant.
The rendezvous party did leave a note and some food, but they buried it, and it wasn't found until too late. And while waiting for rescue, Wills died of exhaustion and starvation. Soon after that, Robert Burke himself also died at a place called Burke's Waterhole on Cooper's Creek in South Australia. There is no exact date on when he died, but they generally accept it as June 28th, 1861. What was that feller's name? I can't remember his name other than King. One of the 3 guys that went with him. He survived with the help of some Aborigines, which was really lucky because there's reports, I guess, that Robert Burke was actually shooting at the Aborigines to drive them off before he died. So lucky he ran out of bullets and he died, and King was saved by the Aborigines. And in September, he made it back to Melbourne, and then Alfred William Howitt helped to disinter the bodies that they left behind and return them to Melbourne in 1862, where they had a full state funeral and kind of were celebrated as successful, sad martyrs, I guess. And the whole thing comes down to
martyrs. No, to what?
They were really close. A lot.
They were, by the sounds
couple
of it,
of times.
Yeah, it's like if you just gone around the mangrove forest, you probably would have been all right.
I think, if they had brought the right provisions initially, travel a little faster, pick the right time of year instead of the dead of the summer. Yeah. Well, their summer, winter everywhere else. I mean, maybe it's because he was from Ireland. He didn't know that it was summer down there.
It might have been
like, shit, it's hot for December.
Yeah, what I know it's normally warm around here, but bloody hell, it seems to be getting hotter. What the hell's going on?
So that's Robert O'Hara Burke, the one half of the what's the failed exploring crew Burke and Wills.
Wow,
Burke and Wills expedition.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because you mentioned there that they are classed as a success because they actually, compared to the other explorer who died halfway through his version, they did really well. They got kind of the majority of the way there. It sounds like 80% of the way there. The real weirdness here, and it's something that seems to be a common theme in the Victorian era, is why the fuck were they doing this?
I don't know. Where were the people that knew what the hell they were doing?
I know. And okay, I understand like the benefits of connecting the north and the south of Australia through a passage, right? That makes sense. But if you're going to do that, then surely as you do that, you either build a railway track as you're going, or build a big fucking road as you're going. Doesn't that make sense? Like build up the soil so that you can have like a carriageway. I know, like we're years before kind of true rolling out of industrialization in this part of the world, but lay some tracks or some shit,
Well,
anything.
at the very least, travel in like normal exploring sections where you take your
Yeah.
base group and then you go out and do your scouting and come out and plot your next course. But I guess they would have had to know what the hell they were doing to do that. So,
The
I
fact
mean,
that they
he
got to where
fancied
they did.
himself. Yeah, he was like, "Well, I took a boat all the way from Ireland to Australia. I'm an explorer, man. I know what I'm
Yeah,
doing."
yeah, I guess in a sense, all that just means is that you've got, you've become used to the movement of the water while you're on it. But like, he's definitely an idiot because I guess it's more the bravado thing, isn't it? And again, this is another hallmark of Victorian, uh, what we would now describe as probably toxic masculinity. But to a certain extent, if you wanted to be a hero, you had to do something that was borderline stupid. Like I'm going to go to the North Pole, but you've only got like leather and wool and shit. Like you're never gonna make it. I'm Shackleton, I'll be fine. Like it's I'm gonna climb Everest. No, you're not gonna fucking make it. At least take a Sherpa with you for Christ's sake. Like
Right?
all of these crazy things that people were doing because explorers and like people were getting famous on discoveries and exploration and stuff. And it was a very heroic time. But the thing is, you look at a lot of these people that make the landmark kind of discoveries or explorational journeys and all of that, they are either a little bit crazy or very, very arrogant or kind of stupid. And like, you
Don't
know,
don't forget the fourth option. Totally
what,
fucking making it up, like that
yeah,
other dude that found the mosquito people.
exactly. You might be lying. You might be making up a utopia that does not exist, like Gregor McGregor. Um, it's kind of crazy, and like we look back on it now, and we're like, what the fuck were they thinking? They're doomed. But at the time, that shit was kind of normal, and I
Yeah.
guess it had been established a long time before because Australia itself was as the result of a really kind of somewhat deluded exploration, by Cook and all of those people. But that the exploration of the planet was still a big thing. So I guess, I mean, it's a really difficult one to score this. He's definitely a fucking idiot. Like had he not gone exploring, I doubt we'd ever be talking about this guy. I mean, I know we wouldn't with a lot of the people, but like he probably would have just been a guy who served his time in the police force, retired on his military and police pension, and nothing was ever heard from him again, except maybe when he was killed by a spider or a snake or whatever the fucking giant marsupial out there, whatever. But like for him to do something so clearly stupid that was almost certainly going to lead to his death is just, you question his sense of priorities, really. Anyway, in terms of scoring this guy, because I mean, yeah, he did actually lead a load of people to their deaths,
Well,
and
just 3 or 4.
yeah,
The rest of
just
them
three
made
or
it back
four.
okay.
And like the stuff he chose to take in his expedition, like just exchange that for water and
Oh,
food,
yeah.
and
Dude,
you are
1,500
fine.
pounds of sugar.
What the fuck? Were you going to be making like ale on your journey or something? What were you thinking?
That
Maybe
might
he
have
had a
been it.
really sweet tooth. We'll never know. But,
Ugh.
for that alone, I think this guy, because by the very fact he nearly made it, I'm going to give him an 81.
Okay.
So,
Alright.
yeah, because he definitely did kill people. He brought, and actually they deserve their own fucking score for buying into this. Like, he's loading up a china cabinet full of useless shit. Maybe I shouldn't be with this guy. Like,
Right.
it's not too late to back out when you see him bringing a stationary cabinet along with him. For Christ's sake,
Yeah.
I'm going to bring my own staples with me. What the fuck are you thinking? But yeah, I think an 81 is a fair score for a guy
I think
who
so.
really didn't think anything through. which is again as a hallmark of Victorian exploration. It's the foolhardiness of no planning. Very much Mark Thatcher. I'm going to drive from Paris to Dakar. Oh shit, I'm lost. I'll just ask hopefully mummy will militarize half of Africa to get me out.
See, now if only if Robert Burke's dad had been a prime minister's mother, he might have
fine
saved.
Everyone in Australia would have descended on the outback to look for this stupid fucking idiot. Yeah, I think 81 is fair because yes, people died in his watch, but like I'm kind of amazed that he nearly got there and he actually did better than an actual explorer. So for that, he gets a little bit of a reduction in the massive score.
All right.
This guy is a little bit different, a very different line of work from Mr. Burke. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Lyndon Baines Johnson, the most powerful prick in the world. I have to give credit for the nationalpost.com for a fair chunk of this article. That kind of comes into play later on. And obviously other sources like Wikipedia and stuff. You'll notice that the bit I've cribbed at the start is at least 2 years old by what I'm about to say. So, as the world awaits the next nasty utterance from Donald Trump, there you go. That's dated it a little bit. Although he's still saying stupid shit now. So who?
I get to listen to it like this though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like now it's less like everywhere. It's less ever present. One can only marvel at how history itself has ended up in a shithole. Amid the chronic shock and horrified reactions, people have become blind to the fact that he is not yet the most disgusting US president in living memory. That title belongs to a Texan Democrat, Lyndon B Johnson, a howling, flatulent tormentor of women whose cussing and racism remain breathtaking today. And actually, they were at the time. You know, this guy was saying shit off the record because he knew people were not going to be happy if it got out. And if you're offended by Trump's level of vulgarity, you really, really don't want to hear about Lyndon B Johnson. But I'm going to tell you anyway.
But at least he had a cool cowboy hat.
He did have a cool fucking cowboy hat. Better than that fucking dome of quaff pubes, walnut whipped into a shape on the top of Trump's head. That's quite a description. Lyndon Baines Johnson was born on August 27th, 1908, near Stonewall, Texas, in a small farmhouse on the Pedernales River. He was the eldest of 5 children born to Samuel Ely Johnson Jr. and Rebecca Baines. Johnson had one brother, Sam Houston Johnson. Ye fucking are. And 3 sisters, Rebecca, Josepha, and Lucia. The nearby small town of Johnson City, well, there's a lot of coincidences with this dude's name, here we go, was named after LBJ's father's cousin, James Polk Johnson, whose forebearers had moved west from Virginia. So he was just like, I was the first person here. I'm naming it after my town. I'm naming it after myself. You can now marry your cousins.
Damn my family for never getting anywhere first.
No, just like plant your flag, like, right, this is my town, but there's like 50 other. No, it's mine. No, I don't care. I was the first one to do it. Plus, I dibs. So, Johnson had English, Irish, German, and Ulster Scots ancestry. So basically, he's the whitest human being on the face of the earth. Through his mother, he was a great grandson of pioneer Baptist clergyman George Washington Baines, who pastored 8 churches in Texas as well as others in Arkansas and Louisiana. Baines was also the president of Baylor University during the American Civil War. That's kind of cool. Yeah.
Well, I wonder what that was like, because you never really think about there was still life going on during the war.
Exactly.
How do you're just in college while people are fighting out across the street.
800,000 people are dropping around you, and like you're like, oh god, there's so much noise from the musket fire outside. Can we close the window, please? Fucking brother killing brother outside the window. Jesus Christ. So Johnson's grandfather, Samuel Ely Johnson Sr., was raised as a Baptist, and for a time was a member of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. In his later years, the grandfather became and I'm going to struggle to say this, Christadelphian.
Huh.
whatever
I've
that is.
never heard of it.
Neither have I. One of those.
Does it have anything
weird,
to do with the KKK?
possibly, given the amount of swear words this guy comes out with towards racial minorities, but no, I think it was just like, it was one of those, like, I guess like the southern states have got a number of offshoots of different forms of Christianity, don't they? They have localized
Yeah, I
churches and
guess
stuff, and
so.
I think that's one of those. Johnson's father also joined the Christadelphian Fenian Church towards the end of his life. Later, as a politician, Johnson was influenced in his positive attitude towards Jews by the religious beliefs that his father, his family, especially his grandfather, had shared with him. Johnson's favorite Bible verse came from the King James version of Isaiah 1:18. Come now and let us reason together. Sadly, not something he practiced in private. LBJ, and nothing in there about come now and let us reason together while I stand naked in front of you. There's nothing in there about his habit of doing that. In school, Johnson was a talkative youth, that's code for being a loudmouth prick, who was elected president of his 11th grade class. He graduated in 1924 from Johnson City High School. This name's following him everywhere.
Yeah. How do you live that down where you're
I
like,
don't know.
My name is Johnson. I'm from Johnsontown.
Johnson City High School. And yes, all of those names mean penis. So
thank you.
there we go. And it followed him into his office, just like his penis followed people out of his office. Where Johnson participated in public speaking, debate, and baseball. He was a baseball fan, apparently.
Yeah.
At the age of 15, Johnson was the youngest member of his class. Pressured by his parents to attend college, he enrolled at a sub-college of Southwest Texas State Teachers College, SWTSTC, in the summer of 1924, where students from unaccredited high schools could take the 12th grade courses needed for admission to college. That's a great idea. That's we have a similar thing in this country. We have like I have 2 degrees. One of them is an HND. So like an HND is a higher national diploma. So like if you kind of want to up your college entry points, you take that. And I upped my points to the point where I did a degree and a half thereafter. So I actually ended up with like 2 degrees as a result, because I did a giant major and a minor in American studies. So I actually ended up with 2 degrees because the HND counted as half a degree. So yeah, that's good that you have a similar system, at least.
Well, kind of. I mean, we've got junior colleges and
Sure.
GED tests, so
that's good. It's important to have that, because it provides a level playing field to a certain extent with people who, may not have been in the best situation or in the right academic solution that they needed to do the studies they need.
Right.
So Johnson left, although Johnson left the school just weeks after his arrival and decided to move to Southern California. I'm moving to Hollywood. He worked at his cousin's legal practice and in various odd jobs before returning to Texas, where he worked as a day laborer. So it's like a little folly over to California.
That's weird. Like I'm barely out of high school. I thought about going back to get my high school equivalency. I'm gonna go work some legal jobs for my cousin.
In California in the 1920s, like that's not the most glamorous of times to be over in like California, really. I guess like Gold Rush.
It's
End
just
of the Gold Rush.
I mean, we're into prohibition and flappers and Hollywood starting up. So I mean,
that's true. There is that. Yeah,
it's just I don't. In the 20s, you could just wander off with just getting out of high school and go do legal work.
Pretty much. Apparently, you could be a paralegal with basically no education. That's kind of amazing.
Back and he's a ditch digger.
Yeah, it's like, no, I miss my countryside. I'm going back home. In 1926, Johnson managed to enroll at SWTSTC again, which is now Texas State University. He worked his way through school, participated in debates and campus politics, and edited the school newspaper, the College Star. The college years refined his skills in persuasion. I bet it fucking did. And political organization. For 9 months, from 1928 to 1929, Johnson paused his studies to teach Mexican-American children at the segregated Wellhausen School in Cotulla, some 90 miles south of San Antonio in LaSalle County. The job helped him to save money to complete his education, and he graduated in 1930 with a Bachelor of Science degree in history. Good for him. His certificate of qualification as a high school and his certificate of qualification as a high school teacher. He briefly taught at Pearsall High School before taking a position as a teacher of public speaking. Didn't know that was a thing. That's kind of cool. Wish we still had that going on.
Well, I mean, you get mixed in with like the Toastmasters and stuff. They've got
True.
courses, and
That's
I mean,
true.
I don't know if they have it at schools.
Yeah. But that's a kind of a cool thing. I think that'd be a good thing for a lot of people to take because it kind of builds confidence, doesn't it? That's great. This is at the speaking at Sam Houston High School in Houston. It's fucking these Johnsons and Sam Houstons. These fucking names are cropping up everywhere. It's like the whole fucking state's named after him and his family. That's crazy.
Yeah.
When he returned to San Marcos, this is many years later. This is kind of like an afterthought more of anything. When he returned to San Marcos in 1965 after signing the Higher Education Act of 1965, Johnson reminisced, I shall never forget the faces of the boys and girls in the little well-housed Mexican school. I remember even yet the pain of realizing and knowing that the college was closed to practically every one of those children because they were too poor. And I think it was then that I made up my mind that this nation could never rest while the door to knowledge remained closed to any American. I mean, that good for him.
That's hella good stuff right there. Yeah. Now all of a sudden I like him. What happened?
That's super progressive. For the mid-60s, that's and a Southern Democrat as well. That's an incredibly progressive stance to be taking for a man who, he grew up in basically poverty in the southern states. Like, I guess he can accept that. But the idea, it's the important part there is any American. He is basically saying we are all Americans. Stop drawing lines. And that in the 60s, that's a big fucking statement for a president to make right there.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I wish some people would make it again.
We kind of need to keep reminding ourselves that everybody is an American as long, so I think that's an important thing to emphasize. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. I miss when they used to talk about the melting pot and absorbing culture and becoming all American culture. But
and I know it's kind
now you appropriate culture.
It's kind of it is sad that that element has been so kind of mixed up and it's so fractured at the moment. I do hope that comes back. We always go through extreme times in human history, and hopefully we're coming towards the end of one now. I do hope that the next generation, who seem certainly a much more level-headed, kind of calm, certainly compared to my youth, can take that and run with it, because they've lived through an extreme time, and nobody should have to live in the post 9/11 world that we've experienced for the last 20 years. Anyway, back to LBJ. In 1937, after the death of 13-term Congressman James P. Buchanan, Johnson successfully campaigned in a special election for Texas's 10th congressional district that covered Austin and the surrounding hill country. He ran on a New Deal platform and was effectively aided by his wife. He served in the House from April 10th, 1937 to January 3rd, 1949. I kind of feel like running on a New Deal platform, it's kind of a no-brainer at this point, because like anyone who proposed like a positive change, like you were bound to get elected, because the country's so fucked at this point. 1937, the effects of the Great Depression are still being felt. And then all of a sudden, Roosevelt comes up with his New Deal, and holy shit, it actually works. Like anyone who's like, I am going to help you, we are going to get through this together. It's like, how can you not elect a guy that says that,
Right. Yeah.
So smart move on his part. Bit of a no-brainer, but yeah. President Franklin D. Roosevelt found Johnson to be a welcome ally and a conduit for information, particularly about issues concerning international politics in Texas. So Texas politics then. It's called Operation Texas, apparently. And the machinations of Vice President John Nance Garner and Speaker of the House Sam Rayburn. Johnson was immediately appointed to the Naval Affairs Committee. He worked for rural electrification and other improvements for his district, which is great because actually those communities they're probably still, to a certain extent, they're probably still living in the 19th century if they're not electrified. That's
Oh yeah,
so
if they
important.
don't have electricity coming out, and that's on the end of like the Dust Bowl and
Yeah, Jesus,
the Depression. Yeah, so he's doing good
electrification
shit.
brings. Yeah, he's doing so far. He's doing great shit, and like
Yeah,
his focus is on the poor, the people who do not have the means to help, or are being discriminated against, and he's helping these communities. When you electrify stuff, life immediately gets better. You have access to so many different things.
unless it's a
So
chair.
yes, as long as it's not a chair.
Sorry.
So, no, that's funny. So Johnson steered the projects towards contract. Oh, here we go. This is the first kind of red flag. Johnson steered the projects towards contractors he knew, such as Herman and George Brown, who would finance much of Johnson's future career. So the cronyism is already starting to creep in here. That's kind of shitty. You know,
That's
like
kind of about when it really started, I suppose. I mean, it started to spread from like Atlantic City. They kind of like coined it.
Yeah, and like if we look at Democratic politics for the last like 60, 70 years leading up to this point, the Tammany Hall shit, like there was a lot of cronyism in Democratic politics at the time. And I guess it's still endemic in the 1930s as well, which is really, really sad.
It just gets better.
It's definitely solved now. In 1941, he ran for the Democratic U.S. Senate nomination in a special election, losing narrowly to the sitting governor of Texas, businessman and radio personality, which I'm sure pretty much helped him a lot, being a radio personality, W. Lee O'Daniel. O'Daniel received 175,590 votes, 30.49%, to Johnson's 174,279 votes, 30.26%. That's a very narrow margin of victory. Like, just 1,300 and something votes. That's
where did
really
the other
narrow.
Percentage go?
Yeah, well, I guess it's like your kind of your third parties, your independents, and stuff like that. Yeah,
seems like
there'll be a bunch of people running. Yeah. Now for his accidental military career, which is one of
accidental.
It's fucking hilarious. Johnson was very good at dodging military action, but somehow he ends up with a medal. So let me tell you about that. Okay. Johnson was appointed a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Naval Reserve on the 21st of June, 1940. While serving as a U.S. representative, he was called to active duty 3 days after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. His orders were to report to the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C. for instruction and training. Following his training, he asked the Undersecretary of Navy, James Forrestal, for a job in Washington. Please don't send me to the front line. I'm scared. He was sent instead to inspect shipyard facilities in Texas on the West Coast. Like that I get that. That makes sense because, you know, it's useful use of his time, I guess.
Well,
although, what the fuck does this guy know about ships? He's been living in the middle of Texas his whole life.
Was he was already elected?
He's kind of part of, I've skipped over a bit of it because it goes on and on. He was already in politics at this point. So he's like in and around Democratic politics, and he's being used in various capacities around there. So
seems like a horrible idea to get involved with doing any sort of reserve military service if you're already in the protected zone there.
I know it's the whole I'm not a fortunate son type situation. Yeah, I definitely feel that he probably did it as a political maneuver. It's a very smart thing to do. You're like, if you are from Texas and you don't at least attempt to fight, I guess you kind of fucked as a politician, really, aren't you? So, and he's young enough to still fight. So,
do you really trust a Texas Navy guy?
No.
Well, wait, I guess they got the Gulf there.
They've got coasts for sure, but like he is not from the coast. He is from, like you said, the Dust Bowl area. You know, there's
by Austin there, yeah.
Not a huge amount of coast going on around there. So he's ordered to the west coast of Texas. In the spring of 1942, President Roosevelt decided He needed better information on conditions in the southwestern Pacific and to send a highly trusted political ally to get it. And after a suggestion by Forrestal, Roosevelt assigned Johnson to a 3-man survey team covering the South Pacific. He must have pissed off Forrestal, because this fucking guy... can I go to Washington? No, fuck off back to Texas. Forrestal, we need someone to go to the front lines to assess it. I'll just send Johnson. Fuck this guy. I don't like him.
Is it dangerous? Yeah, let's send Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. So Johnson reported to General Douglas MacArthur in Australia, of all places. There's the link. There's the link between that two guys.
There we go.
And MacArthur sent him to make a track between the North and the South. No, he didn't. Johnson and 2 U.S. Army officers went to the 22nd Bomb Group base, which was assigned to the high-risk mission of bombing the Japanese airbase at Lai in New Guinea. On June the 9th, 1942, Johnson volunteered as an observer for an airstrike on New Guinea by B-26 bombers. Now, that kind of makes sense, because at this point, they're already bombing the shit out of this area. He's in one of, like, a multitude of bombers, and he's just like, I will go and watch. But that is fucking it.
Well, if I'm going, I'm pushing the button, damn it.
Yeah. If you're going, you kind of want to jump in like one of the machine gun turrets and just have a bit of a fight. A bit of fun. Reports vary on what happened to the aircraft carrying Johnson during that mission. Johnson's biographer, Robert Caro, who does not think highly of Johnson, by the way. This guy points out a lot of the racism, accepts Johnson's account and supports it with testimony from the air crew concerned. The aircraft was attacked, disabling one engine, and it turned back before reaching its objective, though remaining under heavy fire. So essentially, it was shot at, and it was like, fuck me, we are gone. And turned around, and they were like, quick, it's getting away, shoot at it. Other claims that it turned back because of generator trouble before reaching the objective, and before encountering enemy aircraft, and never came under fire. This is supported by official flight records. So,
well, what happened was he didn't go before they left, like they tell you to.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I can see firing in the distance, and I haven't had a piss. Can we turn around, please? Other airplanes that continued to the target came under fire near the target about the same time that Johnson's plane was recorded as having landed back at the original airbase. So it was fucking nowhere near. Yeah, as far as we can tell, it was nowhere near the fighting. However, MacArthur recommended Johnson for the Silver Star for gallantry in action, which I don't get. All he did was get shot at. If getting shot at is all it takes to get a fucking award, then literally millions of Americans should have medals right now. Because plenty of you people have been shot at. None of you have medals to show for it.
They owe me a few medals.
They owe you a few. Even if you've been to a shooting range and there's been one careless fucking idiot, and there's always one at some point in your life, I guarantee you should have had a medal for that experience, because he would have been dicking around half drunk. So yeah, and this is what MacArthur said: for gallantry in action, fuck off. He didn't do anything in the vicinity of Port Moresby and Salamaua, New Guinea, on June the 9th, 1942, while on a mission of obtaining information in the Southwest Pacific area. Lieutenant Commander Johnson, to obtain personal knowledge of combat conditions, volunteered as an observer on a hazardous aerial combat mission over hostile positions. This is all very elaborate, to be honest. Yeah. Anyway, as our planes neared the target area, they were intercepted by 8 hostile fighters. When, at this time, the plane in which Lieutenant Commander Johnson was an observer developed mechanical trouble and was forced to turn back alone, presenting a favorable target to enemy fighters. He evidenced marked coolness despite the hazards involved. His gallant actions enabled him to obtain and return with valuable information. Thanks for being a sitting duck. Here's your fucking medal. He didn't do anything. He got shot at.
How do you get? I got a medal. What did you do in the war? I was an observer. I watched. The son of a bitch got a medal for going on a ride alone.
Exactly. And like they're saying, oh, he demonstrated marked coolness. Like, nobody's gonna say Johnson shit his pants and was screaming like a child the entire way there and back. They're always going to say, "Oh yeah, he was totally calm. He was very presidential, very statesmanlike." But like at that point, like you're getting shot at by Japanese fighters. You're like, "Well, there's fuck all I can do about it.
Right.
Might as well accept my face. I trust these guys. There's enough of them in this bomber. Plenty of other bombers around us. I'll just let whatever happens. I'm a fatalist."
Yeah,
like,
buckle in and take a nap. What the hell are you gonna do?
I know, exactly. He can't do shit. He's there to watch. He's not even like on the fucking. He's not even looking down. He's just observing the mission. What a fucking
hanging out
the window,
medal
for that
revolver.
Anybody want a coffee? I can do a coffee run in the back. We've got a hot plate. That'll do, right? Anyway, so that's Johnson's limited, ridiculous military career, which somehow earned him a fucking medal, which is just ridiculous. In the 1948 elections, Johnson again ran for the Senate and won in a highly controversial Democratic Party primary against the well-known former governor Coke Stevenson, who has a fucking hilarious name. I love that.
Yeah, he does.
Coke Stevenson. Probably Rick James's favorite ever politician. Johnson drew crowds to fairgrounds with his rented helicopter dubbed the Johnson City Windmill, which is definitely something he tried to call his actual penis at some point in life.
Dude, it's a move.
Yeah, exactly. Look, it's my election helicopter. He raised money to flood the state with campaign circulars and won over conservatives by casting doubt on Stevenson's support for the Taft-Hartley Act, which is curbing union power. So I don't think he's going to stomp out them unions. I'm a Democrat. I'll definitely do it. No, you fucking won't. Stevenson came in first in the primary, but lacked a majority. So a runoff election was held. Johnson campaigned even harder and spent even more money, while Stevenson's efforts slumped because he ran out of fucking money. So
that'll do it.
That's politics for you. Outspend the other guy. The runoff vote count handled by this is where it gets really fucking fishy. The runoff vote handled by the Democratic State Central Committee took a week. Johnson was announced the winner by 87 votes out of 988,295, an extremely narrow margin of victory. However, Johnson's victory was based on 200 patently fraudulent 608 ballots reported 6 days after the election from Box 13 in Jim Wells County, in an area dominated by political boss George Parr. The added names were in alphabetical order and written with the same pen and handwriting, following at the end of the list of voters. So like Zebekiah, J, yeah.
Good grief.
I know. Some of the persons in this part of the list insist. The added names were alphabetical. Same pen. Some of the persons in this part of the list insisted that they had not voted that day. Election judge Luis Salas said in 1977 that he had certified 202 fraudulent ballots for Johnson. Fucking hell!
And he only won by 87.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. So he lost. Robert Caro made the case in his 1990 book that Johnson had stolen the election in Jim Wells County, you fucking think, and that there were thousands of fraudulent votes in other counties as well, including 10,000 votes switched in San Antonio. Fucking hell, this is so dirty.
Just switched them.
Just like, yeah, just jury rig over there, please. The Democratic State Central Committee voted to certify Johnson's nomination by a majority of 29 to 28, with the last vote cast on Johnson's behalf by the publisher Frank W. Mayborn of Temple, Texas.
Okay.
The state Democratic Convention upheld Johnson. Stevenson went to court, eventually taking his case to the U.S. Supreme Court. Good for you, dude. But with timely help from his friend and future U.S. Supreme Court Justice Abe Fortas, Johnson prevailed on the basis that jurisdiction over naming a nominee rested with the party, not the federal government.
Okay.
Fuck. Jesus. That's the stinks of bullshit. Johnson soundly defeated Republican Jack Porter in the general election in November and went to Washington, permanently dubbed Landslide Lyndon. Johnson, dismissive of his critics, happily adopted the nickname. So, yeah, he's like, yeah, fuck you guys. I'll take that.
Landslide of 87 votes.
87 votes. Dodgy as fuck. Now let's talk about the good things Johnson was involved in, because there is a decent list of things that Johnson did. I'm not going to run through his entire history because we could be here all night, and I'm aware that, you know, we need to get to bed at some point. But let's talk about his good points. The new president, so when Johnson took control after Kennedy was assassinated, thought it advantageous to quickly pursue one of Kennedy's primary legislative goals, a tax... Oh, sorry, me. That was a bit gross. A tax cut.
I just did that too.
It's catching. Johnson worked closely with Harry F. Byrd of Virginia to negotiate a reduction in the budget below $100 billion in exchange for what became overwhelming Senate approval of the Revenue Act of 1964. Congressional approval followed at the end of February and facilitated efforts to follow on civil rights. In late 1963, Johnson also launched the initial offensive of his War on Poverty. Just an FYI, when you start a war with a noun, you're going to lose. Nouns are indestructible. You're never going to beat them.
Yeah, and it typically it's a war on a specific class of people, not so much an idea or a thing.
Yeah, you're not really doing it for the reasons you say you're doing it. Like a war on poverty, a war on drugs, a war on terrorism. None of them were won, and they all still very much exist to this day. And they were all distractions from what was really being proposed in those situations, like the criminalization of minorities and stuff. So recruiting Kennedy relative Sergeant Shriver, the head of the Peace Corps, to spearhead the effort of the War on Poverty. In March 1964, LBJ sent to Congress the Economic Opportunity Act, which created the Job Corps, the Community Action Program designed to attack local poverty. The act also created VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, a domestic counterpart to the police corps. So those are pretty good. You know, he's at least trying. You know,
it would be nice
if some
of them still existed, I suppose.
I know, and like a lot of this, you know, this will come from personal experience. You know, the guy will have seen grinding poverty in his time in Texas, so I understand that, and I actually applaud this part of Johnson. There's in every politician, because here's something we should know: 99% of politicians believe their shit. Right? It doesn't matter how insane or full of shit you think they are. A lot of them believe it wholeheartedly, no matter how insane it is. And when they believe in stuff like a war on poverty, they're probably doing it because they have a very personal connection with the things at hand. So I applaud Johnson for doing this. It was never going to work, but at least he's trying. And, you know, efforts by politicians, this is what should be applauded, because at least there's a framework of a plan that might work in the future there, potentially.
Yeah.
So good for trying. Let's see. So, President Kennedy had submitted a civil rights bill to Congress in 1963, which was met with strong opposition. Johnson renewed the effort and asked Bobby Kennedy to spearhead the undertaking for the administration on Capitol Hill, partly to get rid of Bobby Kennedy because he fucking hated him. In March of 1964, after 75 hours of debate, the bill passed the Senate by a vote of 71 to 29. Johnson signed the Fortified Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law on the 2nd of July. Legend has it that the evening after signing the bill, Johnson told an aide, "I think we just delivered the South to the Republican Party for a long time to come," anticipating a backlash from Southern whites against Johnson's Democratic Party. He was right. So, if he said that.
It's just sad that it mattered.
I know that it had to happen.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy that Jim Crow and all of the segregation and shit. It just needed to do that.
It was such a I don't know. Sorry, just looking back on it, it was such a silly progression that was so ass backwards all the way through from, I mean, the end of the 1800s to
Mm.
the 1964 for.
I know. There's a similar thing in this country. There was a Labour politician in the early 1960s who, given the opportunity, managed to pass legislation in the UK which legalized homosexuality and legalized abortion, not because it was popular, but because he knew it was the right thing to do. And God bless that man. People hated him for 25 years after that shit got passed. And he was absolutely right. The decriminalization of homosexuality, people were still going to prison for being gay. That's just crazy.
I can't wrap my head around any of that.
I know. And like the abortion thing, women were dying in the most horrific conditions because they were having backstreet abortions.
Right.
And like incredibly dangerous stuff. And like, look, you have to control this stuff. And I think the American government and the world to a certain extent is waking up to that with the drugs debate. Like, you have to control this so that people aren't like putting ridiculously dangerous chemicals into their bodies. Like, if you control it, at least you know that it's not going to fall on its arse, you know?
Yeah.
And things have been better with abortion. And I know it's a hot topic in America at the moment, but you know, I've read a book called Freakonomics. It's about economics and giant changes in culture. And they were looking at why the crime rate in America plummeted in the 1990s. And a lot of people were saying, oh, maybe it was because harsher sentences were handed out, or because crack became more expensive, or because of all this stuff. And no, the people who looked into it found that 75% of the reason that the crime rate dropped the way it did was because of Roe v. Wade, because there were a generation of disaffected kids just weren't there because their young mother, single mother families, those women had access to abortions. And these disaffected, fatherless kids weren't existing. They just weren't there to commit crimes. So
they didn't
as
have
a result,
to come up beaten in orphanages and
exactly. They didn't have to go through the system to be made into hardened criminals because their mothers had the option of not having them. And as a result, the crime rate plummeted. So good to a certain extent. There's a debate to be had about that, but yeah. Anyway, back to Johnson. Johnson wanted a catchy slogan for the 1964 campaign to describe his proposed domestic agenda for 1965. Eric Goldman, who joined the White House in December of that year, thought Johnson's domestic program was best captured in the title of Walter Lippmann's book, The Good Society. Richard Goodman tweaked it to The Great Society and incorporated this in details as part of a speech for Johnson in May of 1964 at the University of Michigan. It encompassed movements of urban renewal, modern transportation, clean environment, anti-poverty, healthcare reform, crime control, and education reform. I am on board with the impetus behind all of that, no matter how watered down it became.
I still feel like they missed a golden opportunity to slogan it, America needs a little Johnson in it.
let's insert some Richard into some Johnson.
No, not him.
America. Not him. No, that happened later. So, and also another final fact. He championed the Voting Rights Act, an incredibly important piece of legislation, which helped the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 get rid of national quotas, which had been around since the 1920s, and doubled federal spending on education from $4 billion a year to $8 billion a year. Johnson also signed the Gun Control Act of 1968 into law, which was incredibly popular at the time because it was only a few years after Kennedy was shot. So people were actually in favor of gun control at that point.
Machine guns, though, damn it.
Yeah. that wasn't so good.
I like machine
the idea
guns.
behind it was good, but then it morphed into something else. So, I mean, overall, those are some pretty good things.
Yeah, he did stuff.
The ideas behind them are kind of noble. So,
yeah,
I mean,
means well.
He means well. He's a Southern Democrat that is in favor of gun control, and healthcare reform, cleaning up the environment. These are all kind of really rare things. So I'm really pleased.
Can't help but feel like it's a front for funneling money off of.
We're gonna get to that now.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Now let's get to the bad stuff. And let's start with the big thing, the biggest cloud over Johnson's tenure in office. At Kennedy's death, there were 16,000 American military personnel stationed in Vietnam, supporting South Vietnam in the war against North Vietnam. Vietnam was partitioned at the 1954 Geneva Convention into two countries, with North Vietnam led by communist government. Johnson subscribed to the domino theory in Vietnam. The domino theory, by the way, was the impetus behind the majority of the Cold War conflicts. It probably wouldn't have happened. It was just a lot of it was paranoia. Yeah. And he prescribed to a containment policy that required America to make a serious effort to stop all communist expansion, because he was like, fuck, they're going to get down to Australia and we are going to lose access to all those poisonous snakes if it turns communist.
But the women.
But the hot women will all be forced into working, and instead of sitting on the beach, it's just not right. That's Johnson. That's definitely Johnson's way of thinking. On taking office, Johnson immediately reversed Kennedy's order to withdraw 1,000 military personnel by the end of 1963. By the end of 1964, there were approximately 23,000 military personnel in South Vietnam, which is up from 16,000. U.S. casualties for 1964 totaled 1,278. But by the middle of 1965, the following year, the total U.S. ground forces in Vietnam had increased to 82,000 people. In the late summer of 1964, Johnson seriously questioned the value of staying in Vietnam, but after meeting with the Secretary of State, Dean Rusk, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Maxwell D. Taylor, declared his readiness to do more when we had a base, or when Saigon was politically more stable. He expanded the numbers and roles of the American military personnel following the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which is like years later. We know that was all sorts of kind of crazy bullshit. By the middle of 1967, so 3 years later, nearly 70,000 Americans had been killed or wounded in the war. In July, Johnson sent McNamara, Wheeler, and other officials to meet with Westmoreland and reach an agreement on plans for the immediate future. At the time, the war was being commonly described by the press and others as a stalemate. Westmoreland said such a description was pure fiction and that we were winning slowly but steadily, and the pace could excel if we reinforce our success. What the fuck? Throw more bodies at it. Jesus.
Yeah, it was. They were busy with the whole Air America thing and getting all the cocaine and heroin in here. I mean, never mind.
Yeah, no drugs, no war on drugs. Though Westmoreland sought many more, Johnson agreed to increase and send 55,000 more troops to Vietnam, bringing the total in 1967 to 525,000 U.S. military personnel. It's like the country's full. At that point, that's like 1/5 of the population, I think, of South Vietnam. That's crazy.
Huge.
That's ridiculous. On the 23rd of June, 1967, Johnson traveled to Los Angeles for a Democratic fundraiser. Thousands of anti-war protesters tried to march past the hotel where he was speaking. The march was led by a coalition of peace protesters. However, a small group of Progressive Labor Party and SDS protesters placed themselves at the head of the march. When they reached the hotel, they staged a sit-down. Efforts by march monitors to keep the main body of the marchers moving were only partially successful. Hundreds of LAPD officers were massed at the hotel, and when the march slowed, an order was given to disperse the crowd. The riot act was read, and 51 people were arrested, and pretty much everybody else there was beaten to within an inch of their life. Just a giant fucking riot broke out, and none of it would have happened had the LAPD not done what LAPD always does.
Yeah, well, that's where it began. Back then. I mean, I guess in the 50s. Yeah.
The start of the Vietnam riot season, which went on and on and on. It was just, I mean, we talk about the riots in the early 90s after the Rodney King kind of court case. That was happening like every week in America around about Vietnam. Like the kind of level of rioting, that was every other day.
There was a lot of intensity with it. I mean,
yeah, it was really sad. And actually, it brought about the end of the war. That and Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite decided he'd had enough of the war and talked about it on air, and that was the end of it. Middle America was like, Walter Cronkite doesn't like the war, right? We're out.
Well, it seems like we should have came to that conclusion a hell of a lot sooner, but
yeah,
70,000
dead.
The point in time in American history where I feel like a lot of damage was done as far as our evolution as a culture and civilized, happy society. Like we're stomping down people that wanted peace and labeling them as bad people, and yeah.
And that's the start of the division between various people. And they talk about America losing its innocence, and that's kind of an open-ended idea, because the idea that America had innocence is a question in itself. But yeah, certainly this period in time, the 60s and 70s,
start moving into more of a police state, and outlawing weed.
I definitely think that the post-war triumphs and the movement of society started to very much divide around about this point in American history. This was one of the first massive war protests in the United States, and the first in Los Angeles, ending in a clash with riot police. It set a pattern for the massive protests that were to follow. Due to the size and violence of this event, Johnson attempted no further public speeches in venues outside of military bases, which, fucking hell, you're not going to get reelected if you're only doing speeches in military bases. That is not a good look in the late 60s. Holy shit.
Especially not when 500,000 of your military are overseas, so you're not really talking to them either.
They're all dying. Or like, I remember this statistic, a quarter of servicemen in Vietnam were addicted to heroin. So that's an insane number. And the irony is, we talk about addiction and the way addiction is kind of approached. Of those people, of the 25% of servicemen, so let's say 100,000 people were addicted to heroin in Vietnam, only 5% remained addicted to heroin after they'd spent a year back in the United States, because they had the support of their family, they had jobs, and they had structure around them. So they all kicked the habit except for a small few of them. So that just goes to show, if you want to help someone beat an addiction, help them in multiple ways and give them a structured life. It works.
Don't worry, we fixed that later.
Oh, yeah. The war on drugs totally worked. In October, with the ever-increasing public protest against the war, Johnson engaged the FBI and CIA to investigate, monitor, and undermine anti-war activists. In mid-October, there was a demonstration of 100,000 at the Pentagon. Johnson and Rust were convinced that foreign communist sources were behind the demonstration, which was refuted by the CIA. When the CIA is saying, no, it's you fucking idiot, that's when the paranoia is kicked in. So
yeah.
Now let's move on to one of Johnson's other terrible things. Johnson continued the FBI's wiretapping of Martin Luther King Jr. that had been previously authorized by the Kennedy administration under Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Yeah, that was pretty fucked up. As a result of listening to the FBI tapes, remarks of King's extramarital affairs were made by several prominent officials, including Johnson, who once said that King was a hypocritical preacher. This was despite the fact that Johnson himself had multiple extramarital affairs. Johnson also authorized the tapping of phone conversations of others, including the Vietnamese friends of a Nixon associate. Jesus Christ. General scummy bullshit right there. Fuck me, that's dark. It was not widely known for years, and this is where we get to the vulgarity of Johnson. It's not widely known for years that Johnson had a recording system in the Oval Office. This system, like the more infamous one of Richard Nixon, captured many of the very regrettable comments, but it would not be definitively described until the 1999 book by historian William Doyle. Transcripts of the recordings were edited and released through historian Michael R. Bestlos, beginning in the late 90s. One reaction to Johnson's coarse language was a tendency to sanitize the public record. British journalist Henry Brandon has recalled how the Washington Post, who were in the room at the same time as him, rendered Johnson screaming bullshit at the top of his voice to a calm bull. So that was it. If he'd done that, if he'd been a politician in this day and age and he'd said bullshit, it probably would have helped him out. He probably would have been more popular.
Yeah,
bullshit.
Well,
he's one of us.
You gotta be strong and down to earth and batshit crazy, and they're all behind you.
He's demonstrating a lot of those things. So exactly how repulsive was Johnson? He was horrid enough that the way he said things was almost as bad as what he said. Anyone who came into contact with him was at risk of encountering a spectacle of burping, farting, nose picking. I beg your pardon. He didn't just
same
thing, and crotch scratching. Congressman Richard Bolling, who witnessed some of this, told Merle Miller, "I wouldn't say Johnson was vulgar. He was barnyard," which is like, he's not bad. He's just an animal.
Fair enough.
Okay. Like, he knows no better. He's an idiot. Just don't worry about it. Worse, Johnson had no sense of personal space and treated conversations as a creepy, hands-on affair. Miller learned from Washington Post editor Ben Bradley that you really felt as if a St. Bernard had licked your face for an hour, had poured you all over. And like he smoked like a fucking chimney. That would have been absolutely disgusting for him to get that up close. For women, the ordeal was even worse. And Bradley claimed that Johnson groped Katharine Graham and was bumping up against the breasts of a Washington Post writer, Meg Greenfield. In her memoir, Graham said nothing of this and is suspiciously quiet about almost all of Johnson's peculiarities. She does admit she was forced into kissing him on the cheek at least once. So that's sexual assault. A couple of different ways right there. A truly unlucky few got to see Johnson relieve himself. Reporter Sam Schaefer toured Johnson's Texas ranch and was stunned when Johnson urinated right in front of him in the open. Arthur Goldschmidt, a friend and United Nations official, was in the Oval Office when Johnson when the latter suddenly headed for the washroom, took a crap, and then shaved and showered, all while continuing his conversation as though he was doing the most normal thing in the world. So he was like, no, we need to keep talking to you. Come in, please. So he took a shit, had a shave, and then got in the shower. And they're like, I think we should probably just wait until you've done all of this, mate.
He was just ahead of his time, man. Everybody does that on their cell phone these days anyway.
Yeah, like, when you're not in a Zoom call, you clearly just, definitely. As for what Johnson was actually saying during all the above, he was known for folksy aphorisms that were crude, sometimes racist, and often weird, including, "It was raining as hard as a cat pissing on a flat rock," why a flat rock? I don't know.
Splatters a bit.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah. As straight as an Indian shits, which
how do you get a reference for that?
I don't know where he's going with that.
What was the sample size?
Like you kind of killed off the majority of the native population already. So and their shitting patterns specifically mentioned that seems very odd. And the importance of fighting an opponent till he's shitty as a bear. What the fuck does that mean?
To me, I would figure that just is a drunk bear.
Pretty much. Yeah.
I mean,
bears maybe get drunk. We don't know. Maybe they eat fermented fruit. Who knows? I bet they do. Yeah, totally. Getting some of that honey, rubbing it on there, then you got a bit of mead going. That's great. These became more disturbing in his retirement years when UPI reporter Bill Face was told by him that subsequent White House economic policies were the worst thing that's happened to this country since pantyhose ruined finger fucking.
Wow.
What a statesman.
Good Lord, man.
That's your president. God damn, these pantyhose. I can't go around finger fucking people anymore. What the fuck?
Was he just throwing digits in people? Well, no, they weren't paying attention or what?
Oh, that's terrible.
Good Lord.
My God. I don't know. I've never heard. I mean, some of these you can say, yeah, it's folksy aphorism, sure, but who says that?
Yeah,
even
well,
back in the 60s and 70s.
that's kind of a lot where it's like that's what stopped you is pantyhose.
Yeah, thank God for pantyhose then. Jesus Christ. The pantyhose bit was part of a troubling pattern. Biographer Woods learned that Johnson would tell close friends that his own wife, the delightfully named Ladybird, was the best piece of ass I've ever had. But he still
Hey,
cheated on her.
that's
So a
well, it
lot.
was nice to say.
Yeah.
I guess.
Darling,
I hope
come
I'm
here. I want
referred
to tell you
to
something
that way
from
by
the
my wife.
boys. Darling, I'm holding a cabinet meeting while taking a shit. I want to give you a compliment. Come in here. You're the best piece of ass I ever had. Can you pass me a towel so I can shower in front of these men? Jesus Christ.
Well, to be fair, if my wife referred to her friends or me to her friends as the best piece of ass she's had, I would be
yeah.
blushing.
As men, I would fucking take that.
Right?
You know, somebody, oh my God, best I've ever had. Like, as men, we're like, yeah, I was. But you kind of can't say that about women to other
It's not
people.
polite.
It's not polite. Even like we say the 60s, like it was a different time. It was much more conservative back then. You can't go around saying that your wife is the best piece of ass you've ever had. No, dude, Jesus.
Right?
Like he must have been drunk. Surely he's got to be drunk through most of these. Right?
I would imagine that seems about accurate. That's about the
Constant
time when
drinking,
you
sure.
keep the whiskey in the office.
Absolutely, yeah. In the secret cabinet department bit, you know, in the drawer. Recorded Oval Office telephone conversations included a 1964 exchange with staffer Ralph Dungan concerning female appointees to government positions. Here we fucking go. Johnson kept asking Dungan about their looks. Former staffer Yolanda Boozer, who's got an awesome fucking name, told Miller that Johnson would comment if white female White House employees gained any weight, provoking anxious dieting. These poor fucking women. If I mean, the one good thing about putting on weight is that at least he's not going to rub against them. Maybe. Fuck. Wear pantyhose and put on some weight. You might be safe.
Right. Good Lord.
Jesus.
Smile, honey. You look party.
You might the party. Yeah. Have I ever told you about my wife? Regardless of gender, Johnson's treatment of subordinates could be appalling. In one of her very rare confirmations of Johnson's behavior, Catherine Graham says she saw Johnson apoplectically yelling at Jack Valenti over some mistake, screaming at him for over 10 minutes consistently. He must have lost his voice. Who screams for 10 minutes? That's quite intense.
That's a lot of angry.
That's a lot. She describes the tirade as callous and inhumane. A senior advisor, James H. Rowe Jr., reportedly quit after witnessing a similar incident. Johnson's own vice president, Hubert Humphrey, informed Miller that Johnson's need to control people caused him to say of certain individuals that I've got his pecker in my pocket. This guy is obsessed with penis.
Yes. Well, his name's Johnson.
His name is Johnson.
And he comes from Johnsontown.
He does. Johnson City High School.
There we
go.
Johnson City.
Yeah. If there's a whole city, not a town, there's a city of Johnsons. It's a whole city of penises out there. And then we get to the worst part. Then there's his use of the N-word. Although Johnson styled himself as a civil rights crusader and did make progress on civil relations, on race relations, I beg your pardon, he still presided over a United States torn by racial violence. His public and private statements show that he never realized himself, he himself may have been part of the problem. For example, his biographer Robert Caro said he referred to the manual labor of his youth as N-word work.
Maybe he was trying to take the power away from the word.
I think it's more like he doesn't know what he's doing.
He just thought that's what it was called, like spirit animal. I just thought that's what that was called. I didn't know it was bad.
No, that's it gets worse though. A recorded 1964 telephone conversation with the hapless Jack Valenti touched on Johnson's electoral chances in Texas for an upcoming presidential race. I think I can take every Mexican in the state and every N-word in the state.
Take them where?
like for the vote. It's kind of crazy. Several weeks
Oh,
before the presidential vote, Johnson spoke before a New Orleans crowd. Oh God, about how Southern politicians constantly twisted all issues towards race. That was a valid point. But then the speech became strange. All they, the voters, ever hear at election time is N-word, N-word, N-word. Woods
okay.
discovered that somebody sanitized the official record of the speech, substituting the word N-word with other things. But witnesses confirmed that he really did say 3 of them in a row.
You mean like car horns and barking dog
I
noises?
mean, like, he probably would have, they probably changed it to, like, I don't know, something that wasn't racial, I guess.
Oh,
Robert Dallek learned of a 1967 meeting in the Oval Office with Texas state official Larry Temple concerning the possible black candidates for Supreme Court. Johnson stressed he would consider only high-profile people. When I appoint a N-word to the bench, I want everyone to know he's an N-word. Fuck.
yeah. I think maybe he just thought that meant black.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know how else you. I mean, he doesn't seem to be racist as
Just
far
stupid.
as like he's not like a white supremacist
Oh, no.
necessarily. He just doesn't realize that that's not nice. I think
Yeah.
he's just completely oblivious.
Yeah, dude, just fucking stop. Yeah, no one's able to challenge him at this point because he's so fucking intimidating and so angry and arrogant and out of control and cronyistic and almost becoming a demagogue that no one's gonna, like, of all the things you could say, look, please stop using the N-word, dude. Like, instead of that, they were like, maybe we should get out of Vietnam. You know, like the N-word issue is like, of all, that was probably lower down the list of priorities of getting this maniac away from power as possible. Like, we can fix his language later. Let's just get him out of the fucking White House for now. Unsurprisingly, when race rioting erupted in Los Angeles in 1965, Johnson was bewildered, and he confided to aide Joseph Califano his fear that N-words will end up pissing in the aisles of the Senate. Ironically, 60 years later, it was actually white supremacists that did that for the most part. So
Yep,
he got it
redneck
wrong.
piss in the aisles of Congress.
And wearing ridiculous costumes. Well, they did it as well. In the end, however, it was the uncontrollable Vietnam War that destroyed Johnson's administration and wrecked his legacy. William Doyle unearthed a fitting quote from a moment in mid-1965 when Johnson was moodily strolling on the grounds of the White House, cursing, "I don't know what the fuck to do about Vietnam. Get out." Of course you know what to do. For fuck's sake, man. I'll end with this fitting quote from historian Kent Germany, who talked about Johnson's poor public image, saying, and this is perfect, it kind of sums up Johnson perfectly, "The man who was elected to the White House by one of the widest margins in US history and pushed through as much legislation as any other American politician now seems to be remembered best by the public for succeeding an assassinated hero, steering the country into a quagmire in Vietnam, cheating on his saintly wife, exposing his stitched-up belly, using profanity, picking up dogs by their ears, swimming naked with advisors in the White House pool, and emptying his bowels while conducting office business. Of all those issues, Johnson's reputation suffers the most from his management of the Vietnam War, something that has overshadowed his civil rights and domestic policy accomplishments and caused Johnson himself to regret his handling of the woman I really loved, the Great Society." That's a kind of a perfect summation of Johnson right there. And thus ends the tale of LBJ. Just fucking, just how the fuck. So there you go. What do you make of that? Shit.
There's a lot of it where I guess I can find like forgiveness on stuff. He's just a rude, crude cowboy from you know the old westy times.
Like so fucking rude. Like this guy is we talk about politicians being statesmen. I use that word a lot. Being statesmanlike is someone that you have faith in to make decisions of a sensitive, delicate nature. Someone who can find the middle ground, someone that can compromise, someone that is smart enough to play the game with people that don't necessarily want to be in the room with them. Johnson does not seem like one of those people from any of this.
No, he's rude, crude, sexual harassing, southern boy. I mean, cowboy, basically. That's why he wore that hat all the time.
He's like the most powerful cowboy in the world. And
prior to George W.
Exactly. And I guess part of the problem as well is that outside of America, there's this idea that American politicians and presidents have been seen as yeehaw cowboys. And I think part of that can be traced back to LBJ and his behavior.
Well, we've gone through a run of them. I mean, LBJ to Reagan shortly after that, from Reagan to Bush to the other Bush, who...
Yeah. Even to the first Roosevelt, Teddy was an actual fucking cowboy.
Yeah, Rough Rider. Right?
Rough Rider, and a hell of a guy. But, unfortunately, like, the good parts of the cowboy's nature, a lot of which Roosevelt actually embodied, have been overtaken by the brash, braggadocio, kind of reckless nature that people sort of associate with cowboys. And unfortunately, that's something that has been crystallized by behavior, like you were mentioning, like Reagan, Bush, and and LBJ, one of the core kind of founders of that way of viewing American presidents.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know that he was like one of the worst ones, because we went on a slide.
Yeah, you did.
Just wandered right the hell off. But I mean, gosh, his just obliviousness to how you conduct yourself around other human beings.
And also, like, he would not get out of Vietnam. He's responsible for tens of thousands of completely unnecessary deaths. So
much, just almost on the basis of, I started it, I don't know what to do now.
We're America, we win, we have to continue. It's like, no, you don't. Stop killing people. And also, you could say, had it not been for LBJ being the person he was, would you necessarily have had the counterculture movement? It probably wouldn't have been quite as high profile as it was had they not had someone to rally against like LBJ and his government.
It may have spread slowly and more organically and better, I guess. If they didn't have the war to rally against, we may have actually made some better advancements in technology and civilization.
Exactly.
So, oops. For that and all the deaths in the war, and like my least favorite period of time there, I'm gonna put him up there at a 90, just because there was no fucking reason to be in Vietnam.
Why? I know we talk about you talk about the Korean War and a lot of other wars around that time, and the British Empire had a lot of those. Like we mentioned, the Crimea War and the Boer War and stuff like that. A lot of these kind of somewhat pointless exercises in basically military saber rattling. That's a lot of it was like, look at us, we're powerful, let's everybody die now, sort of thing, like. And a lot of Vietnam and Korea, it feels pointless. I mean, there was definitely a point to the first Gulf War, when Kuwait was invaded, that there was consensus that was the right thing to do around the vast majority of the world. Loads of people went into that war. Second one, definitely not. But Vietnam, okay, maybe at first, you got communist aggression, maybe you're not into that. But the fact that it went on as long as it did and caused 70, 80, 90,000 deaths, and all the rioting and the property damage, just...
Think about this. Dude was a history teacher, right?
Yeah.
Apparently he missed that whole bit about the French there that just happened.
It's just, for a man who is, like you say, as educated as he eventually became, to have ignored the lessons of history, despite the fact he is surrounded by people who could readily acknowledge and tell him about all the mistakes that this is exactly the same as, is kind of shocking. And it's something that we focus on a lot in this podcast, is that people don't seem to learn.
No, we just keep doing the same shit.
Same shit over and over again. History is a flat circle. So, yeah, I'll take 90 for LBJ, because he did some really good things, or at least he attempted to. And for him to have fucked up his presidency the way he did, I mean, there aren't too many people who start on such a wave, like, you are following one of the most revered Americans in history, right? He is assassinated in tragic circumstances, and you get the rub of saying, I am going to continue his legacy. His work will not go unfinished. To start from there, where people are like, oh, thank God, this guy we believed in, his right-hand guy is going to carry on. We love this guy by proxy. To go from there to Logan Paul finding a Japanese corpse and filming it and putting it on the internet, it's like, that's quite a fucking slide.
Yeah.
Really. Well,
and again, that was another history learning moment there, where Lincoln, he's assassinated, and his vice president comes in here and dicks everything up and says, no, we're not doing any of this anymore.
You've been given a golden opportunity. I understand that inheriting somebody else's legacy is not always that easy, but if you want to succeed, follow through with their policies, because they are going to be martyred almost immediately after they're assassinated. That's one of the reasons Reagan got reelected, was because someone tried to kill him.
Right.
And it didn't work. He took a bullet and he was like, I'm Ronnie, I'm fine. And like everyone was like, oh yeah, we'll definitely reelect you. So the reason Thatcher was reelected was because she went to war and won the Falklands. So,
Yeah, that's another weird ass one.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that. There we go. That's LBJ. One of the most, probably it's hard to know now whether he's the most vulgar American president, because there's probably worse people before him, and there may have been worse people since, but definitely think he's
record. I think Trump and him are on par with vulgarity, especially off camera.
Oh yeah, for fucking sure, yeah. But yeah, LBJ and our explorer friend, Mr. Burke, who it's a fascinating case. So that's our episode. This will be coming out around about New Year. So if you guys are looking for the audio version, please keep an ear to the ground. We're also releasing these in video format, which you can watch on Spotify. We're also available on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram. If you look for History's Greatest Idiots on Instagram and Greatest Idiots on Twitter. And also, if you go to patreon.com/History's Greatest Idiots, you can support us directly and get a load of cool free merch if you're a Patreon for long enough. So we've got loads of awesome design stuff. Please go there. Would really appreciate it if we could get some Patreons in. But this has been a great episode. I've had a lot of fun researching LBJ, because despite the fact he's a bit of a gross dude, it's fun to research him.
Yeah, my favorite incarnation of him, though, is on the American Horror Story, the new ones, where he's like dealing with the aliens, and that makes him awesome. So
I didn't know that existed. I haven't watched the American Horror Stories. My wife's watched them, and it's something that I've been meaning to watch.
Oh, they're great.
So I might have to get around to that. I might have to watch that. That sounds really good. But yeah, that's our show for this week. So if you do find yourself being completely unprepared for a dangerous mission out into the middle of a giant fucking desert, or if you start off well in your job but develop a power thirst that can only be satiated by the deaths of 10,000 of your fellow countrymen, then maybe rethink your actions, because it's never too late to stop being a fucking idiot. And we will see you next time. Derek, would you like to say goodbye, please?
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for 24 great episodes so far.
24 episodes. Next episode 25, will be the last in the season. However, we're not going. We will take a little bit of a break, but it's not going to be like a massive break.
I'm gonna take my birthday off.
We'll take our birthdays off for sure, and we'll go straight into season 2, where we hope to bring you loads more amazing idiots. So look forward to that in the not too distant future. But until then, we will see you all soon. Take care now. Bye.